The slot machines go dark in Las Vegas. Guests stand in slow-moving lines that snake through marble lobbies, holding paper receipts and plastic room keys that suddenly don't work. ATMs blink out, casino kiosks freeze, and the websites for some of the most famous resorts in America vanish behind a placeholder message. Security teams huddle in windowless rooms, phones on speaker, dashboards lit red. This isn't a movie set. It's Sunday night into Monday morning, September 10th to 11, 2023, and one of the world's biggest hospitality brands, MGM Resorts, is fighting for operational survival. In a business where every second of downtime leaks money across thousands of endpoints, the decision to pull plugs is drastic and deliberate. The company begins shutting off pieces of its digital nervous system to stop the bleeding, triaging like a trauma unit. The incident radiates outward from IT war rooms to the casino floors, the front desk stations, the mobile apps, the digital key readers, the loyalty kiosks, systems that knit together a modern resort's promise of frictionless luxury. Overnight, MGM's world-class guest experience becomes a manual workaround. That change is jarring not just for customers and employees, but for an industry that treats continuity like a sacrament. At street level, the images are surreal. Gaming machines with error screens, hotel staff writing card numbers down by hand, VIPs waiting behind stanchions like everyone else. Upstairs in conference rooms and secure SOC facilities, the rhythm is different, fast, clipped, procedural. You hear incident commanders assigning tasks, threat hunters carving up networks, legal and comms drafting the first public statements, and forensics teams digging hard into identity logs. The internal question is as old as breach response itself. What do the attackers have? Where are they now, and what must we kill to stop them? This episode is the anatomy of that week. How a short phone call and a well-rehearsed social engineering play pried open the front door. How identity infrastructure became the superhighway. How extortion pressure collided with brand calculus. And how a global entertainment giant turned a high-speed business into a carefully choreographed recovery. I'm White Hat Wes, and this is the MGM Resorts Cyberattack of 2023, told in real time, then dissected in slow motion. To understand why this incident hits like a body blow, you have to understand the organism. MGM Resorts International isn't just a casino operator. It's a sprawling platform that merges hospitality, entertainment, retail, dining, sports betting, and loyalty economics into a single integrated machine. That machine runs on identity. Guests are their MGM rewards number. Employees are their IDP logins. Vendors and partners traverse federated trust paths. Every tap, swipe, and scan across this ecosystem feeds orchestration systems that promise convenience and yield. Digital room keys in your pocket, reservations that follow you, comps that appear precisely when you're most tempted to stay and play. In the old world, casino security meant cameras in the ceiling and chips on the table. In the modern hospitality stack, the ceiling is the cloud, the chips are APIs, and the critical consensus layer is the identity provider, the service that vouches for who you are and what you can touch. When identity becomes the perimeter, help desks become kingmakers. If you can convince a service desk to reset a factor or enroll a new device for a high-privilege user, you don't need to break the cryptography. You just need to sound competent, be persistent, and ask the right questions. That is the tradecraft of a crew widely associated with this incident. A social engineering forward collective often called Scattered Spider, linked in various reports to the ALPHV, also known as BlackCat, ransomware as a service operation. They specialize in breaking people, not math, phone-based social engineering, SIM swap familiarity, deep reconnaissance on organizational charts, and a knack for exploiting the gray areas of support procedures. Their approach is as modern as the platforms they target. They use public footprints like LinkedIn to harvest plausible details. They learn the lingo of ticketing systems, and they call it just the right moment to ride an employee's cognitive overload. Ransomware in this model isn't just a payload. It is the exclamation point at the end of a sentence that begins with identity compromise and privilege escalation. By the time encryption detonates, the attackers have usually mapped the floor plan, touched crown jewel systems, and exfiltrated data to power their extortion demands. Payment is only one branch of the decision tree. The other branch is resilience. Do you have the playbooks, backups, and trust anchors to rebuild faster than the threat actor can squeeze? The hospitality sector adds complexity, because tech and operations are fused to the guest experience. A hotel casino is a small city with 1,000 microsystems. point-of-sale terminals, digital signage, elevator controls, HVAC, staff scheduling, warehouse logistics, loyalty apps, reservation engines, surveillance of the surveillance, and regulated gaming systems with strict compliance boundaries. Each piece is separately resilient but collectively intertwined. If identity segmentation is porous or runbooks assume perfect conditions, an attack at the identity layer cascades quickly into lobbies, cages, and casino floors. The MGM brand also magnifies the stakes. These are flagship properties on the Las Vegas Strip, regional resorts across the United States, and digital betting platforms. A cyber event here isn't just an IT problem, it's a live, televised disruption of an entertainment icon. The message to every other operator in the space is immediate. Guard your identity plane, drill your help desk, and assume the phone call is the intrusion vector. The attackers know this visibility cuts both ways. It turns the extortion dial by adding public pressure to the internal calculus. Finally, there's the regulatory and fiduciary overlay. A publicly traded company must balance speed of disclosure with accuracy, making real-time updates under uncertainty. Operating across states and jurisdictions means engaging multiple regulators, law enforcement partners, and privacy regimes. The legal framework turns raw technical facts, like which attributes were accessed, into consequential determinations about notification, credit monitoring, and potential litigation exposure. In other words, what the SOC finds in logs will ripple into courtrooms months later. The background is the battleground. Sunday into Monday, September 10 to 11, 2023. The first visible sign arrives not as a data leaked post on a dark web forum, but as a wave of malfunctions across property systems. MGM takes portions of its environment offline to prevent further spread and preserve forensic integrity. Public-facing websites redirect to a short statement acknowledging a cybersecurity issue. On the ground, guests see the impact. Reservation portals timing out, slot machines displaying out-of-order or error screens, digital room keys failing, and card transactions flaking out. In an industry calibrated for flow, the friction is unmistakable. By Tuesday, September 12th, the incident is national news. The FBI confirms an investigation is underway. MGM emphasizes that resorts remain open. Staff are assisting guests and operations are being restored in stages. But restoration in an identity-centric incident is not flipping a breaker. It is an orchestrated dance. Validate trust, rebuild from clean baselines, reissue credentials to critical users, rotate secrets, and bring segments online in a sequence that doesn't reintroduce the threat. Behind the scenes, containment work is exhaustive, cutting off suspected footholds, hardening admin pathways, and tightening help desk flows to prevent a repeat during the response itself. Midweek, the dominoes become clearer. Authentication fabric is under extraordinary scrutiny. The teams are combing through identity logs, recent MFA resets, unusually timed enrollments, sessions from atypical networks, out-of-band admin actions. The working narrative solidifies internally. The attackers used phone-based social engineering to impersonate a legitimate user, persuaded support to reset or re-enroll a multi-factor method, and leveraged that foothold to escalate. Once the IDP door opened, the adversary moved with intent toward higher privilege accounts and systems that stitch hospitality operations together. Late in the week, slot floors begin to hum again. Websites come back with caveats. Mobile app functionality returns in pieces. Manual processes give way to normal ones as property IT teams execute cutovers in carefully managed maintenance windows. Meanwhile, comms teams draft customer notifications in anticipation of what forensic truth will require. Plain description of what happened, what data attributes were affected, and what protections will be offered. The public doesn't see the dozens of low-drama decisions that make or break a recovery. Which domain controllers to rebuild versus cleanse, what EDR policies to tighten, when to rotate federation keys, and how to stage a return to production without relighting an attacker's beacon. On Friday, September 15th and into the weekend, the extortion carousel spins. Ransom notes and public claims from the ALPHV ecosystem begin circulating, together with statements taunting the company's response. The actor's psychological game is familiar. Escalate pressure by portraying the defenders as incompetent, trumpet alleged levels of access, and insinuate that further chaos will ensue unless negotiations begin in earnest. Negotiations, if any, are never conducted on Twitter. They live in the encrypted channels where playbooks meet policy. The business question at MGM is not abstract. Is paying a ransom compatible with the company's values, regulatory posture, and long-term risk? By the following week, the most visible disruptions are receding, but the internal tempo remains high. Teams are now in the stabilize and investigate phase. Stabilization means closing the emergency bypasses used during the first days of triage and replacing them with durable controls. Investigation means reconstructing the timeline down to the minute. Which identity was abused first? Which groups were accessed? Where tokens were minted, what lateral movements occurred? What data access crossed sensitive boundaries? And which systems were encrypted versus taken offline defensively? As September closes, customer notifications begin landing. The company's message is unambiguous about the data attributes exposed for some customers. Names, contact details such as phone, email, and postal address, gender, dates of birth, and driver's license numbers. For a more limited subset, social security numbers and passports. Passwords and payment card data are not believed to be compromised. The date of unauthorized access is pinned to September 11th, 23. These details aren't just PR. They represent legal commitments rooted in evidence, and they trigger the offer of credit monitoring and identity protection services. In October, MGM updates investors and regulators, quantifying an expected negative impact of roughly $100 million to adjusted property results for the month of September, a figure that translates human inconvenience into economic terms the market understands. But numbers don't capture the most meaningful thread of the timeline. A help desk phone call on one day precipitated a multi-week business disruption at continental scale. That is the geometry of identity compromise. It compresses the distance between a support script and a shut-off slot floor to almost zero. The entry point in this class of incident is less a single exploit than a sequence of plausible steps that each feel ordinary. Step 1. Reconnaissance. The attackers build a dossier on a target user or support path. Name, title, internal lingo, recent travel, even the cadence of reply emails harvested from prior phishing. LinkedIn is reconnaissance fuel. So are public press releases, org charts, and job postings that hint at tooling. If the organization uses Okta or another IDP, an attacker studies how that company talks about MFA, laptop enrollment, and executive support exceptions. Step 2. Initiate a support interaction. Designed to shorten the distance between a convincingly urgent story and the desired outcome. Reset an MFA factor or add a new one. The pretext might be a device lost at the airport, a travel-induced lockout, or a time-sensitive executive need. The attacker turns the help desk's strengths, empathy, speed, and customer focus against it. If the script permits identity verification via knowledge-based details and email confirmations alone, and if voice is implicitly trusted, this can be enough to pivot from "Who are you?" to "Let me help you." Step 3. Once a multi-factor method is reset, the attacker logs in as the user. With the correct combination of username, password, reset or previously compromised, and new factor, the adversary gets a session token issued by the identity provider. That token is liquid permission. If the user is privileged, the attacker inherits those privileges. If the user isn't, the attacker uses the access to hunt for tickets, documentation, or vault hints that point to higher value accounts. Remember, the attacker is not trying to break crypto. They're trying to get the system to vouch that they are you. Step 4. Escalate privileges. In some reported versions of this incident, the attackers targeted administrative surfaces of the IDP and Azure Active Directory, now Entra ID, seeking roles that effectively let them mint and manage trust. With these roles, they can create or modify accounts, add MFA devices to administrator identities, and set conditional access policies that make detection and eviction harder. They can also tamper with directory synchronization components, Okta agents, AAD Connect, or similar, to impede defender access or siphon credentials. Even the rumor of lockouts in identity infrastructure forces defenders into slower, safer restoration techniques. Step 5. Explore and pivot laterally. With high privilege in identity and cloud control planes, lateral movement into on-premises assets, VMs, and application backends is a question of mapping, not brute force. The attackers query directory groups, inventory shared drives, enumerate endpoints by EDR console, and hunt for secrets in orchestration tools. They pursue systems that translate identity into revenue, reservation engines, point-of-sale gateways, loyalty databases, kiosks, and the middleware that synchronizes them. If domain controller hashes are accessible, they are harvested, cracked offline, and reused to stage further privilege. Step 6. Exfiltrate. Extortion isn't compelling unless the actor holds something that privately or publicly increases leverage. Data exfiltration in a hospitality context tends toward identity attributes, reservation histories, loyalty details, and scanned documents that contain driver's license or passport images. Exfiltration can be quiet, trickling via cloud storage or attacker-controlled infrastructure, or noisy if defenders are already in the network and the attackers are racing the incident response clock. The actors don't need every record. They need enough data with enough sensitivity to power the threat. Pay or guests will be exposed. Step 7. Encrypt or otherwise coerce. Ransomware is the headline act for a reason. It creates unmistakable disruption. But it's only one lever. If the environment has been partially shut down defensively, the threat actor's encryption may be less detonation and more ransom note and claims, bolstered by whatever disruption defenders inflicted on themselves to keep guests safe. The attackers then amplify the narrative that only negotiation can restore normalcy, presenting themselves as the fastest route to recovery, sometimes even offering decryption assistance as a perverse form of support. Throughout these steps, persistence is about timing and redundancy. Attackers add MFA devices to multiple accounts so that evicting one foothold doesn't lock them out. They create shadow admin users that blend into existing naming schemes. They abuse APIs that fewer defenders monitor. They rotate infrastructure and lure incident responders into focusing on the loudest alarms while the quietest channels carry the crown jewels out the door. And they weaponize public statements, posting manifestos that claim deep, ongoing access to sow out inside boardrooms. From a defender's lens, this is an identity-driven kill chain. The MITRE ATT&CK mapping is not academic, it's a practical checklist. Initial access via phishing or spear phishing and valid accounts. Persistence via account manipulation and multi-factor authentication interception. Privilege escalation using abuse elevation control mechanisms and valid accounts. Defense evasion using disable security tools and modify cloud compute infrastructure. Credential access through OS credential dumping and unsecured credentials. Discovery using account discovery, permission group discovery, and network service scanning. Lateral movement with pass the hash and exploitation of remote services. Collection via data from information repositories. Exfiltration through exfiltration over web service. Impact via data encrypted for impact and inhibit system recovery. The most sobering part of the technical breakdown is that none of these steps require 0 days. The novelty is in orchestration and speed. A well-practiced social engineering script, a flexible identity platform, intricate but human-operated help desk procedures, and complex hospitality operations form the stage. The attacker's edge is rehearsal. The defender's edge is segmentation, verification rigor, and the discipline to favor resilient recovery over quick wins that leave backdoors intact. On the casino floor, the impact looks like silence where there should be noise. Slot banks that usually flash and sing are dark or stuck at boot. ATMs refuse withdrawals, frustrating guests and constraining cash flow on busy days. Kiosks that normally print loyalty offers or allow self-service transactions behave unpredictably or go offline entirely. At the front desk, mobile check-in becomes a memory. Staff revert to paper, patience, and the art of explaining a highly digital outage in very human terms. These are not minor inconveniences. They are breaks in a promise the hospitality industry exists to make: seamless delight. Operationally, the costs multiply fast. Every hour that a reservation system sits offline, unsold rooms might remain unsold, or they're manually sold at a fraction of normal speed. Every guest who abandons a line contributes to the invisible ledger of reputational harm. Every manual override, opening parking gates, issuing physical keys, handwriting receipts, introduces security trade-offs you never want to make at scale. The irony is sharp. To prevent an attacker from doing damage, you may have to do some yourself by pulling plugs that interrupt revenue. Financially, the hit is concrete. By early October, MGM quantifies an expected negative impact of about $100 million to adjusted results just in the September period. That figure is the arithmetic of slowed bookings, comped frustrations, delayed revenue recognition, and the cost of specialist incident responders, legal counsel, and PRs. It doesn't count the long tail, months of remediation projects, upgraded controls, additional training, and the intangible cost of risk appetite recalibrated by pain. For customers, the fallout centers on data exposure and the anxiety it causes. The company's findings, conveyed in notices, specify the categories of information accessed for some customers: names, contact data, gender, dates of birth, and driver's license numbers, with a more limited set involving social security numbers and passports. Many guests interact with MGM repeatedly over years, at different properties, with different documents, so the mere idea of sensitive ID information crossing into criminal hands feels like a personal betrayal, even if no misuse occurs. Credit monitoring offers and identity protection services are the minimum you do to respect that feeling. But they don't erase it. Employees absorb their own impact. The help desk's role becomes the center of hard conversations. A script that felt service-oriented last week now looks porous. Support agents who pride themselves on getting executives back online quickly wrestle with the reality that speed is a weapon. Training gets rewired with more aggressive identity verification steps. Managers reinforce that no is sometimes the most secure form of help. Engineering and security staff log marathon hours to rebuild and reinforce systems. HR and leadership must recognize the human cost of that grind. In gratitude, in recovery time, in mental health support, regulatory fallout unfolds on a parallel track. Privacy statutes trigger notification requirements. State and federal agencies ask for timelines, artifacts, and corrective action plans. Investors demand clarity on financial impact and remediation strategy. Litigation follows swiftly, not because plaintiffs know the exact contours of the breach, but because class action playbooks are as practiced as incident response. Months later, settlements and regulatory inquiries turn the technical arc of a breach into public accountability. Who was harmed? How will they be made whole? And what changes will prevent recurrence? There's also the subtle but powerful impact on the wider ecosystem. Vendors who service MGM's properties revisit their own identity and support controls. Competitors accelerate upgrades to their IDPs. Industry groups host emergency webinars about help desk verification. Insurance carriers rewrite underwriting questionnaires to probe identity governance and incident response runbooks. Law enforcement uses the publicity to urge earlier reporting and tighter cooperation. In that sense, an attack on a flagship operator becomes a teachable moment, whether anyone likes it or not. The MGM incident will be remembered as a pivot point because it reframed where the front door is. If you picture perimeter defense as firewalls and endpoint agents, this attack redraws the map. The front door is a phone number answered by a good person who wants to help. The lock is a multi-factor prompt that can be reset by procedure. The key is a token minted by a cloud identity service that trusts what the help desk just vouched for. The future belongs to teams that collapse these distances, where help requires high assurance verification, and where administrative actions are treated like surgical procedures, not customer service. One vector of modernization is help desk hardening. That means replacing knowledge-based questions and email confirmations with cryptographic proof of user possession. Things like secure identity verification apps, biometrics tied to HR systems, or short-lived authorization codes generated through an out-of-band channel the attacker can't easily simulate. It also means policy. If a user calls from an unknown number asking for an urgent MFA reset, the default answer is structured friction. The script should not only permit a no, but enforce it until high assurance checks succeed. Another is identity governance as code. Admin role assignments, conditional access policies, and MFA registrations should be version controlled, peer-reviewed, and continuously monitored. Just as we treat infrastructure as code, we must treat identity as critical infrastructure. Alerts that identify new MFA devices added to privileged accounts, sudden spikes in help desk-driven resets, or unexpected changes to directory sync agents should page responders as if a firewall just observed command and control traffic. Identity change audit logs should be first-class citizens in SIEM pipelines, not an afterthought. Third is privilege isolation that assumes compromise. The idea isn't new. Break glass accounts stored offline, just-in-time admin roles that expire in minutes, hardware-backed keys for high-privilege users, and workstation isolation for domain admins. But the MGM incident underscores how these controls must be designed with social engineering in mind. If a help desk can add a push-based factor to a global admin account with one phone call, the system has implicitly declared that phone call is strong as a hardware token. It isn't. Re-architecting admin flows. so that no single procedure can enroll or reset a privileged factor without multi-party authorization, and physical proof is the route to resilience. Fourth is extortion resistance. Ransomware playbooks must assume dual pressure, encryption-based disruption, and data theft. That means aggressive backup validation, tested restores, offline copies, restore time objectives that match real business speed, and systematic data minimization so that even if files move, the sensitivity of what moves is bounded. Legal and comms teams must rehearse the messaging that follows. How to tell the truth fast, how to support affected customers without hand-waving, and how to coordinate with regulators across jurisdictions without contradiction. Finally, there's the cultural shift. Security programs that celebrate frictionless experiences will need to celebrate useful friction instead, moments when the system deliberately slows down to verify. Executives must model that patience by tolerating extra steps for their own access, rather than carving out exceptions that attackers can impersonate. Boards must treat identity risk as enterprise risk, not IT risk, and invest in the boring but essential plumbing. Asset inventories that are alive, identity diagrams that are accurate, and response runbooks that are tested on bad days, not good ones. In the opening days of this incident, the headlines fixated on the spectacle. Slot machines frozen, key cards failing, websites dark. It was cinematic because the surface-level effects were visible. But what makes the MGM attack enduringly important isn't the optics, it's the lesson. A phone call that convinced a well-meaning support agent to help may have been the first domino. From there, the attackers leveraged identity to move faster than the organization could metabolize the intrusion. The defenders answered with their own speed, shutting down systems not because they wanted to, but because it was the surest way to keep a bad situation from becoming catastrophic. When you strip away the brand names and the neon, you end up with a blueprint for both offense and defense in 2023 and beyond. Offense wins by studying organizations until they can speak their language, then asking politely to be let in. Defense wins by making the polite ask impossible without proof, by isolating the most sensitive privileges behind hardware and human checks, and by practicing the kinds of rebuild that MGM had to do in production. That rebuild is painful, public, and expensive, but it also proves a point. When you invest in recovery muscle, you can take a hit and stand back up. For guests whose information was touched, the incident is personal. For employees who lived the longest week of their careers, it's formative. For leaders who had to make hard calls under pressure, refusing extortion, quantifying financial impact, communicating under uncertainty, it's clarifying. And for the entire hospitality sector, it's a rehearsal they should perform before the next phone call comes in. Because it will. The attackers do not tire. They iterate. They have discovered that the identity plane is where trust lives and where it can be bent. If you operate anything that depends on digital identity, and that is everyone, the MGM breach is not someone else's story. It is a message to your help desk, your identity team, your IR coordinators, your executive assistants, and your board. The message is simple and hard. Your procedures are your perimeter. Your privileges are your blast radius. Your resilience is the sum of your practice. Attackers will find the path of least resistance. It is your job to make that path long, winding, and full of locked gates that require more than a convincing voice on the phone. We end where we began. A casino floor should sound like money in motion. When it doesn't, the silence is instructive. It reminds us that modern business is a choreography of trust, stitched together by credentials and supported by people who care about helping. The attackers knew that. They turned help into harm. The way back is to turn help into proof, privilege into patience, and recovery into ritual. That's the lesson of MGM Resorts 2023. The jackpot the attackers hit wasn't technical wizardry, it was human procedure. The defense now and next time has to be human procedure too.